A reading this morning from Max Ludiker's book, Jesus, the God Who Knows Your Name. You are leaving the church building. The funeral is over. The burial is next. Ahead of you walk 6 men who carry the coffin that carries the body of your son, your only son. You're numb from sorrow, stunned. You lost your husband, and now you've lost your son. Now you have no family. If you had any more tears, you'd weep. If you had any more faith, you'd pray. But both are in short supply. So you do neither. You just stare at the back of the wooden box. Suddenly, it stops. The pallbearers have stopped. You stop. A man stepped in front of the casket. You do not know him. You've never seen him. He wasn't at the funeral. He's dressed in a corduroy coat and jeans. You have no idea what he's doing. But before you can object, he steps up to you and says, "Don't cry." "Don't cry? Don't cry? This is a funeral. My son is dead. Don't cry? Who are you to tell me not to cry?" Those are your thoughts, but they never become your words, because before you can speak, he acts. He turns back to the coffin, puts his hand on it, and says in a loud voice, "Young man, I tell you, get up." Now just a minute, one of the pallbearers objects, but the sentence was interrupted by a sudden movement in the casket. The men look at one another and lower it quickly to the ground. It's a good thing they do, because as soon as it touches the sidewalk, the lid slowly opens. Sound like something out of a science fiction novel? It's not. It's right out of the Gospel of Luke. He went up and touched the coffin, and the people who were carrying it stopped. Jesus said, "Young man, I tell you, get up." And the son sat up and began to talk. Be careful now. Don't read that last line too fast. Try it again. The son sat up and began to talk. Now the question, what's odd about that verse? You got it. Dead people don't sit up. Dead people don't talk. Dead people don't leave the coffins. Unless Jesus shows up. Because when Jesus shows up, you never know what might happen. Jairus can tell you, his daughter was already dead. The mourners were already in the house. The funeral had begun. The people thought the best Jesus could do was offer some kind words about Jairus' daughter. Jesus had some words, all right. Not about the girl, but for the girl. "My child, stand up." The next thing the father knew, she was eating. Jesus was laughing, and the hired mourners were sent home early. Martha experienced a similar miracle. She hoped Jesus would show up to heal Lazarus. He didn't. Then she hoped he'd show up to bury Lazarus. He didn't. By the time he made it to Bethany, Lazarus was 4 days buried. And Martha was wondering what kind of friend Jesus was. She hears he's at the edge of town, so she storms out to meet him. "Lord, if you had been here," she confronts, "my brother would not have died." There is hurt in the words, hurt and disappointment. The one man who could have made a difference didn't, and Martha wants to know why. Maybe you do too. Maybe you've done what Martha did. Someone you love ventures near the edge of life, and you turn to Jesus for help. Like Martha, turn to the only one who can pull a person from the ledge of death. You ask Jesus to give a hand. Martha must have thought, surely he would come. Didn't he heal the paralytic? Didn't he help the leper? Didn't he give sight to the blind? And they hardly knew Jesus. Lazarus is his friend. We're like family. Doesn't Jesus come for the weekend? Doesn't he eat at our table? When he hears that Lazarus is sick, he'll be here in a heartbeat. But he didn't come. Lazarus got worse. She watched out the window. Jesus didn't show. Her brother drifted in and out of consciousness. "He'll be here soon, Lazarus," she promised. "Hang on." But the knock at the door never came. Jesus never appeared, not to help, not to heal, not to bury. And now, 4 days later, he finally shows up. The funeral is over, the body is buried, and the grave is sealed. "If only you had been here," she told Jesus, "my brother would not have died." Something about death makes us accuse God of betrayal. If God were here, there would be no death, we claim. If God is God anywhere, he has to be God in the face of death. Pop psychology can deal with depression. Pep talks can deal with pessimism. Prosperity can handle hunger. But only God can deal with the ultimate dilemma, death. And only the God of the Bible, who dared to stand on the canyon's edge and offer an answer. He has to be God in the face of death. If not, he is not God anywhere. Jesus wasn't angry at Martha. Perhaps it was his patience that caused her to change her tone from frustration to earnestness. Even now, God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus then made one of those claims that place him either on the throne or in the asylum. "Your brother will rise again." Martha misunderstood. Who wouldn't have? "I know he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." That wasn't what Jesus meant. Don't miss the context of the next words. Imagine the setting. Jesus has intruded on the enemy's turf. He's standing in Satan's territory, Death Canyon. His stomach turns as he smells the sulfuric stench of the ex-angel, and he winces as he hears the oppressed wails of those trapped in the prison. Satan has been here. He has violated one of God's creations. With his foot planted on the serpent's head, Jesus speaks loudly enough that his words echo off the canyon walls. "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die." It is a hinge point in history. A chink has been found in death's armor. The keys to the halls of hell have been claimed. The buzzards scattered, and the scorpions scurry as life confronts death. And winds. The wind stops. A cloud blocks the sun, and a bird chirps in the distance, while a humiliated snake slithers between the rocks and disappears into the ground. "Lazarus, come out!" Martha is silent. The mourners are quiet. No one stares as Jesus stands face to face with the rock-hewn tomb and demands that it release his friend. No one stares. That is, except Lazarus. Deep within the tomb, he moves. His still heart begins to beat again. Rapt eyes pop open. Wooden fingers lift, and a mummied man in a tomb sits up. Want to know what happened next? Let John tell you. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. What's wrong with this picture? Answer: dead people don't walk out of tombs. Question: what kind of God is this? Answer: the God who holds the key to life and death. Can Jesus actually replace death with life? He did a convincing job with his own. Fast forward to Sunday morning after the Friday crucifixion of Jesus. Joy is the last thing Mary Magdalene expects as she approaches the tomb. The last few days had brought nothing to celebrate. The Jews could celebrate. Jesus was out of the way. The soldiers could celebrate. Their work was done. But Mary couldn't celebrate. To her last few days had brought nothing but tragedy. Mary had been there. She had heard the leaders clamor for Jesus' blood. She had witnessed the Roman whip rip the skin off his back. She had winced as the thorns sliced his brow and had wept at the weight of the cross. She was there. She was there to place her arm around the shoulders of Mary, the mother of Jesus. She was there to close his eyes. She was there. So it's no surprise that she wants to be there again. In the early morning mist, she arises from her mat, takes her spices and aloes, leaves her house, walks past the gate of Geneth and up to the hillside. She anticipates a somber task. By now, the body will be swollen. His face will be white. Death's odor will be pungent. A gray sky gives way to gold as she walks up the narrow trail. As she rounds the final bend, she gasps. The rock in front of the grave is pushed back. Someone took his body. She runs to awaken Peter and John. They rush to see for themselves. She tries to keep up with them, but can't. Peter comes out of the tomb bewildered, and John comes out believing. But Mary sits in front of it weeping. The two men go home and leave her alone with her grief. But something tells her she is not alone. Maybe she hears a noise. Maybe she hears a whisper. Or maybe she just hears her own heart telling her to look for herself. Whatever the reason, she does. She stoops down, sticks her head into the hewn entrance, and waits for her eyes to adjust to the dark. She hears, "Why are you crying?" And she says, she sees what looked to be two angels, because they're white, radiantly white. They are two lights at either end of the vacant slab, two candles blazing on the altar. Why are you crying? An uncommon question to be asked in a cemetery. In fact, the question is rude. That is, unless the questioner knows something the questionee doesn't. They have taken my Lord away, and I don't know where they have put him. She still calls him my Lord. As far as she knows, his lips are silent. As far as she knows, his corpse has been carted off by grave robbers. But in spite of it all, he is still her Lord. Such devotions moves Jesus. It moves him closer to her. So close, she hears him breathing. She turns, and there he stands. She thinks he's a gardener. "Why are you crying?" he asks. "Who is it you're looking for?" Thinking the gardener knows the location of the body, she asks him to tell her. She will fetch the corpse. But then Jesus speaks. "Mary." Mary was shocked. It is not often you hear your name spoken by an eternal tongue. But when she did, she recognized it. And when she did, she responded correctly. She worshiped him. In a moment, she realized the truth of the gospel that had yet to be spread. The resurrection, not of Lazarus, but of Christ himself. Friday's tragedy emerged as Sunday's Savior. And even Satan knew he'd been had. He'd been a tool in the hand of the gardener. All the time, he thought he was defeating heaven. He was helping heaven. God wanted to prove his power over sin and death. And that's exactly what he did. And guess who helped him do it? Once again, Satan's layup became a foul-up. Only this time, he didn't give heaven some points. He gave heaven the championship game. Death has been swallowed up by victory. Thank you. Goodbye for now.